So, good evening, everyone. We are going to go in further into a new topic today, which is human physiology. So, we're going to discuss about the different organ systems as you normally understand them as in the body. Before that, we have a question from Mandeep. So, I've been asked that B cells attack invaders outside the cell. What does it mean? Outside the cell just means that nothing is going to come inside the B cell or any other cell as far as this is concerned. The mechanism of antibodies is being emphasized here. So B cells are producing antibodies, and any organism like the bacteria which is present, it is not inside the B cell as of now or any other cell. It's just present there, the bacteria, and antibodies are going and attacking it and destroying it. You have to understand this in comparison with the T cells. The T cells are doing the process of phagocytosis. So in the T cells, what is happening is they are bringing things inside their own structure, inside their own cell structure, and then they are destroying it. So that cell, the infected cell, the cell has already been infected, it is being brought inside the T cell structure through the process of phagocytosis and is destroyed. And as far as B cell is concerned, it is releasing antibodies. The antibodies will be produced by it. They will get out of this cell and it will destroy any cell which needs destruction. Okay? All right. So let's, as convention, let's start with one UPSC question. There is a lot of learning lessons in this question, so see if you can solve this and send me your answer. Okay, so Girdhar has asked how genetic mutation is different from antimicrobial resistance. So simply saying, we've discussed at least briefly the idea of genetic material, right? So any change which takes place in this genetic material, that change would be called genetic mutation. Okay, we'll study how genes work also in the next class. And here you just need to know that genetic mutation is that if there is any change which is happening in this genetic material, your DNA. Okay. So this would be genetic mutation. Antimicrobial resistance as a concept is broader. Antimicrobial resistance means that a microorganism is now not being destroyed by a particular medicine. It has become resistant to that antimicrobial drug. We discussed this in a lot of detail. As far as the link between mutation and resistance is concerned, mutation can be one of the reasons why something has become resistant. If there are bacteria in your body and they have become resistant to one particular medication, that would be because the bacteria have undergone genetic mutation. So the correlation would be that genetic mutation could be one of the reasons for causing antimicrobial resistance, though it's not the only one. Okay, there can be other reasons also, or other ways also in which bacteria can become resistant, right? So they do not amount for the same thing. Genetic mutation can be in any organism, in any way, in plants, in fungus, in human beings. Okay. Antimicrobial resistance or drug resistance is specific to microorganisms against whom we are giving medicines. Okay. It might be caused because of mutation, but other than that, there's no correlation between the two terms. Okay, so I have a very varied type of answers here. So Shivani says C, Pratiksha says C, and then I have A by Ajit, B by Sanjay. Okay, all right. This is the reason I wanted to discuss this question, because you projector have not been able to take me to the right answer. The right answer is D. The last option is actually the correct one, and that, let me see if anybody has that answer. Okay, so Arif, Ankita, Neeraj, Sumit have the answer D. But otherwise, most of you are in a way struggling. The question is, people drinking water from a shallow hand pump, right? See, in the many questions, you will not have exact answers the way you think or in the exact logic in which you would want to question. But still, there are 4 options which have been given to you, and out of those 4 options, you have to give one answer, right? That's why in the UPSC paper, the term which is used is most appropriate answer. This is something which is written on the first page of prelims question paper, that pick out the most appropriate option. So we have to identify the most appropriate option. It might not exactly be what you are thinking. So then in this question, there is one specific point, a shallow hand pump. Okay, a shallow hand pump, and people are drinking water from this shallow hand pump are likely to suffer from all of the following diseases except which one, right? Now, this word shallow, this holds a lot of significance in terms of how this question has been framed. When the examiner is saying shallow, what it is trying to say is that this is near the groundwater, is near the ground levels, and anything which is near the ground level has a higher chance of getting microorganisms. The microorganisms can easily be available in this particular water which comes from a shallow area, because contamination chances are high. So any disease which is waterborne, which can be transmitted through water, that would happen here. Okay, so what you had to basically identify here was waterborne diseases or diseases caused by microorganisms, right, through these lists. So a lot of you are saying B, which I do not absolutely think anybody should have a confusion. See, cholera and typhoid They are bacterial diseases caused by contamination of water. Okay. Both cholera and typhoid, they are going to be occurring because of contamination of water, because of polluted water, because of microorganism, in particular bacteria in this case, present in water. Jaundice also can be because of microorganisms only. Jaundice is because of water contamination, mainly the hepatitis virus. If you remember hepatitis A and E, right? They are involved in inflammation of liver, and jaundice is one of the conditions here. Jaundice is one of the condition absolutely associated with water pollution, water contamination. Then there is this disease, fluorosis. Now what comes to your mind is fluorosis would also be because of water, excess amount of fluorine in water, that is what causes fluorosis. But in the context of this question, right, and the emphasis on the fact that it is talking about shallow water, we have to look for waterborne diseases, and whichever is not a waterborne disease, whichever is not because of contamination of water with microorganisms, that disease we select as an option. Okay. So I'm not really supporting the exact sense of this question, because some of you might say ki even if there is more fluorine, so shallow water maybe if it is there, fluorosis would be there, right? But that is not the sense in which the question has been framed, and we have to identify the best possible option. Other than this, no other option will qualify. You've given me A also, B also, C also, but all of these are caused whenever there are microorganisms in water, so they do not qualify. This is the sense of the shallow water pump. There is a significance of putting this word here, right? So that was my idea behind putting this question, so that you get a sense that sometimes you might not get a very perfect kind of an answer, but then you have to solve the question focusing on how it has been framed, what is its sense, why is it written that there's a shallow hand pump, and then get to the answer. The answer is D. So it's actually commendable for all of you who have given the right answer. So details of any kingdoms, do we need to like go through that? This is what Komal has asked. So see Komal, the idea is that you don't need to go through any animals, plants or anything in detail unless and until you are reading about it in the current affairs. Okay, if something is coming to you through current affairs, that is the time when you go into the details of that. Otherwise you can very conveniently just know the names, maybe an example, and that will be all. Okay, we don't need details. Okay, so Bhupesh is saying no matter what, if UPSC says it's option D, then the option is D. No, Bhupesh, you're actually being a little bit more cynical than you need to be. The thing is that in this there are 4 diseases. 3 of these are waterborne diseases. One of them is not waterborne diseases. So you have to eliminate and pick out the most appropriate answer. That's how it is, right? It's not abject. UPSC is not just putting or throwing out anything at your end, right? But yeah, if you have to get through an exam, you have to go through what the organization tells you about. When Tanvi says, which cell does phagocytosis to call if it is a type of innate immunity? So innate immunity mein we had 2 cells. We've written those examples also, Tanvi. Neutrophils and monocytes. They are a type of white blood cells and they do phagocytosis. Okay. Okay, so there's this question which Tanvi has asked, which is probably from your self-test question. So there are statements which are given here. First one says, strengthening of infant's immunity due to mother's milk is a passive form of immunity. So we did this as an example of passive immunity yesterday. So one is correct. Second, active immunity works faster as compared to passive immunity. No, this is not correct. In passive immunity, what is happening is we are giving the antibodies directly. That is the definition of passive immunity. So if you are giving the antibodies directly, then you are saving on the time to recognize and produce antibodies. Okay. That is why, see, in critical cases like anti-snake venom, when we are giving, we can actually wait for the body also. To, the body will naturally also produce antibodies. But why we are not doing it? Because we want immediate action. Because till the time the body recognizes and forming antibodies, it might be very late. And already that venom would have done a lot of damage. So, passive immunity works faster. So, second statement is incorrect. The third one says vaccines provide only active type of immunity. So, I think the third statement is also correct. So, I don't know what is the actual answer which has been given to you, but in my understanding the answer should be 1 and 3, which is actually not an option. So I guess this question has been given by your team of batch coordinators, so maybe they can clarify this question. So Nikhil was not there yesterday. Vikram was there. So Vikram, please check out this question. This question is not correct. You have to change the options, or you can just change the question. The answer should be 1 and 3 only. In fact, the last statement is actually very abject. So very out of line and very vague also. So maybe something can be done in this portion. Okay, so now see, I am not supposed to solve your MCQs here, but okay, fine. Shubham has also put in one question. Which of the following are bacterial diseases in cattle and buffalo? So, first of all, which are bacterial diseases? May influenza is not a bacterial disease. This is something you should know. Influenza is a actually, I am also getting confused. Influenza in cattle and buffalo. I guess you can very easily check this online also. It should not be a problem. Anthrax is definitely supposed to be correct. Tuberculosis and influenza is a viral disease only. So influenza should not be there. Tetanus and tuberculosis both are bacterial diseases, but if it is there in cattle or buffalo, tuberculosis maybe is there in cattle or buffalo. I'm not very sure about tetanus. I'm sorry, I'm in no position to answer this question. I'll have to look this up. So maybe you can just search it online and let us also know. What is the answer to this question, Shubham? According to your portal, if you can just share with us what exactly is the answer so that we'll look into it. All right, so we are going to start with the digestive system here. Now for this section also, what I need to tell you is that you have to be very, very briefly covering these portions, We don't need a lot of details. Maybe 10 years ago, UPSC was very keen in asking you all these questions. Now they are not doing it. So because of that, we are not going to very aggressively go into these portions, right? I'm not making you write anything. You have to keep writing whatever you find relevant here. Okay. The first thing about this process you need to know is that what exactly is digestion. So digestion is basically the breakdown of food into simpler, smaller portions. So you have food with all its different nutrients coming into the body, but that has to be broken down. Okay, that has to be broken down into smaller, simpler particles which can then be absorbed, taken into the blood and utilized in different parts of the body. So this is what is the purpose of digestion, and who is helping us in digestion are the enzymes. I hope you remember what are enzymes. They are agents, they are proteins which are going to be helping in different reactions in the body. And these enzymes in particular, because they are helping in digestion, they would be digestive enzymes. All right. Now we are going to see the journey of food in your body, okay, how this works, right? From the mouth till the end of the digestive system, we are going to see how this is going to work. Okay, so what is going to happen here is that we have different glands, different parts of our digestive system, and they are going to be each producing different enzymes so that the whole system ultimately digests all the nutrients. What are the nutrients? That we've already studied. We have proteins, we have carbohydrates, and we have fats. So ultimately our aim is to break these down. First, in the mouth, we have salivary gland. In the mouth there are glands. Gland would be anything which is producing something. So the mouth has salivary gland. It produces saliva. Okay, the mouth has salivary glands, it produces saliva, and this has an enzyme called amylase. This has an enzyme called amylase, okay, and this amylase enzyme is going to be acting on carbohydrates. There is a gland, salivary gland. So you can just maybe note this down like this, that the name of the gland is salivary gland. What is it producing? Saliva. What does saliva contain? The name of the enzyme is amylase. Amylase breaks down your carbohydrates. So the first thing which is going to be acted upon is carbohydrates. Okay. After this, after being broken down, after the carbohydrates are broken down, the food passes through the esophagus. Esophagus में no digestion takes place. Esophagus is your food pipe. Esophagus is the food pipe, right? And this food pipe takes the food to the stomach. The food pipe takes the food to the stomach. Stomach has protease. Protease, it should be clear to you, is going to be breaking down proteins. And then you have hydrochloric acid, HCl. This is part of a fluid which we call gastric juice. Like you had saliva in the mouth, in the stomach you have gastric juice. Gastric is a word which is used for the stomach. Gastric is the term which is used for the stomach every time, and it is this juice which contains the protein breaking enzyme called protease, and HCl is present. Now carbohydrates first, the second thing which is going to be broken down is the proteins. When the stomach does its digestion process, there are two sphincters at the two ends of the stomach. You can see this word sphincters. They are like muscle bands. So when digestion takes place or breakdown of food takes place in the stomach, these two close. Just to make it a point that nothing goes outside. When the movement is taking place, nothing will be going outside. Fine? Then after stomach, what happens is the next part is the small intestine. The small intestine is a highly coiled part of your digestive system, but this coiled portion is actually the longest part of your digestive system. Okay, it's highly coiled, but it is the longest part of the digestive system. So small intestine has intestinal juice on the same lines as we have been considering right before this. What does this intestinal juice contain? It contains peptidase. The name should tell you that peptidase acts on proteins. Then sucrase, maltase and lactase. This acts on carbohydrates. Okay. So proteins and carbohydrates. These are the three types of carbohydrates. We've already studied about these in the first class. Sucrase, maltase and lactase. Okay. We need different enzymes because the structure of carbohydrates and proteins, all of these are more complex, and we would need multiple enzymes to act on them. By the action of one enzyme, they will not break down completely. Okay. Now we have two more glands which are assisting in the process of digestion. The food will not go into these glands, but these glands are going to give their secretions. The first gland is the liver. Liver produces bile, okay, bile or bile juice you can call it, and bile does not have any enzyme. Okay, there are no enzymes, but it has agents which are going to help in digestion of fat. That is its role, the role of bile. Without enzymes also, it helps in the digestion of fats. Alright, digestion of fats is going to be assisted by bile, which is produced by the liver. So this is the liver produces bile, then this bile is stored in the gallbladder. Okay, the gallbladder also, it doesn't produce anything, its only job is to store the bile. It will store it for some while and then send it to the small intestine. So the small intestine had intestinal juice, now it also has bile. And then there is a third fluid which is coming from the pancreas, so this would be called pancreatic juice. And pancreatic juice has all three things: protease for proteins, lipase for fats, and amylase again for carbohydrates. Okay, so in small intestine, finally everything is broken down into its simplest form: carbohydrates, fats and proteins. And all of this is absorbed in blood in the small intestine. So, absorption into the blood. Absorption into the blood. Okay. So all the nutrients have been absorbed. Now this food item, when whatever is left, whatever the body cannot utilize, the body, whatever the blood will not absorb, that goes into the large intestine. It goes into the large intestine, and in large intestine, whatever water is there, the food component will have water also. So whatever water is there, that is also absorbed. Okay. After this, whatever is left, that is the undigested material, that is the material which is not needed, that has no water, and it is removed. It is supposed to be removed from the body. So through this last part of your large intestine called the rectum, there is an opening outside the body called anus, and this is the portion from which undigested waste come outside the body in the form of feces or stool. So your stool or feces, that is the remnant of your digestive system. Whatever the body does not need, whatever the body cannot digest, whatever does not get absorbed in the small intestine and then in the large intestine after removal of water, is removed from the body. Okay. So this is how digestion works. You need to know what is the purpose of digestion. The purpose of digestion is to break down the food. So this broken down food is then absorbed, and whatever is not needed is removed. Just take a minute to copy all of this down. Okay. So Shubham has given me the answer to that also, where he says that anthrax, tetanus and tuberculosis. So yeah, I think the only way to eliminate this was that bacterial diseases you could pick it up. As such, it becomes difficult to assess if cattle is also having a disease, so that's why I was not very sure. But Shubham, the only way they have eliminated this, or the logic behind this, is that influenza is being a viral disease is left out, and the rest is bacterial disease. Okay, so now Tanvi has asked me another question from the last topic, that phagocytosis for innate immunity is by T and B cells, and for adaptive immunity only T cell. Tanvi, I am not actually following, if you are able to listen to me also. I just told you, what should I say, 20 minutes ago when you put that question, I gave you the names of two cells. Right? I gave you the names of two cells, neutrophils and monocytes. Neutrophils and monocytes for innate immunity. They are the only two types of cells. अब इसमें T cells और B cells कहाँ से आ गए दोबारा? Please go back to that lecture. You have actually written examples. Innate immunity में आप देखो, खोलो, just take a look which cells you have written. Then see where you are placing B and T cells. B and T cells, adaptive immunity, both of them. But B cells do not do phagocytosis. B cells produce antibodies. Innate immunity, non-specific immunity, in that there are only two cells, neutrophils and monocytes. Please turn your pages and look at these. Neutrophils and monocytes will also do phagocytosis. That is correct. But I think you have gone on a very different tangent with the too many correlations you have drawn. I would really suggest that you go through the last class again, right? It is really going to help you. And even after that, if you have any doubts, then you can keep posting your queries. You always have the talk to expert columns. But I guess you send in this query in the starting of today's class and you're probably not able to connect with me. Something is off here. So I'm not able to understand. So maybe you just need to revise things again. Before I discuss this passage of gases, let's talk about what is the utility of respiration, or why do we need this. Now food particles have been absorbed, nutrients have been absorbed in the body. This means that production of energy is the main purpose of respiration. Okay, production of energy is the main purpose of respiration. Okay, and how this energy is going to be produced, that is what we have to learn. The process of production of energy takes place at the level of each cell. Each and every cell will produce its own energy. And if you remember in the first class we discussed that glucose is the main source of energy. Right? And this glucose is being utilized by all the cells of the body. So we have glucose. For production of energy, oxygen is needed. This is broken down into carbon dioxide, water, and energy. Now this is not a balanced equation. This is just to give you an idea about how this system works. This kind of respiration in which oxygen is involved, this is called aerobic respiration. Okay, this is called aerobic respiration. And there is a possibility of having some organisms which can produce energy or perform this process of cellular respiration even without oxygen being present. Such a respiration is called anaerobic respiration. Anaerobic respiration. Okay. So we have glucose, okay, but no oxygen now. No oxygen now. And there is production of ethanol. There is production of ethanol or ethyl alcohol and energy. Okay. So glucose will break down into ethanol and give us energy without the involvement of oxygen. This process is called fermentation. So you might have heard about this term. The next time whenever you hear about this term fermentation, you should know that this is talking about an anaerobic process. A process where oxygen is not involved. And some bacteria and yeast, they are able to survive in anaerobic conditions and do their life cycle or produce energy even without the presence of oxygen. So this is a process which is exclusive to these anaerobic organisms. Okay. One more special case is there in which the human body can also do anaerobic respiration. That is in a special cell called muscle cells. Okay. So in muscle cells, Glucose can be broken down into lactic acid without the presence of oxygen. Now, why do the muscle cells need to do it? Imagine a situation where you are like you're doing some very heavy, very strenuous physical activity, and your body is trying to take oxygen while breathing, but the oxygen is not sufficient. It's not sufficient uh, as compared to the amount of energy which your body is needing. Maybe you're just running. So your body needs more energy than you can get by breathing. So what do these muscle cells do? They become anaerobic. For that time being, they can do anaerobic respiration. So in this case, they want energy, so they will start producing energy even without oxygen. This is their unique property. And this lactic acid, this gets deposited in the muscle cells, and this actually becomes the reason of the muscle cramps which you have. Right? When you run after many days, you experience these muscle cramps. What is the logic behind this? The logic behind these muscle cramps is that lactic acid has accumulated here. Okay, the lactic acid has accumulated here, so muscle cramps are formed. Okay. Another thing which you need to know is that this is an emergency situation. Right? Once oxygen levels will be maintained, you will be doing lesser amount of activity, then in that case the muscle cells again will start doing the normal process of aerobic respiration. Fine. Now how is this exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide taking place? That is the next thing which we have to know. This is happening in all the cells. All the cells, each and every individual cell. I hope you remember mitochondria. For mitochondria, we wrote that mitochondria is responsible for cellular respiration. It is producing energy. We called it the powerhouse of the cell. So why have we called it so? Because of this process taking place. Okay. After this, come to how this exchange is taking place. How oxygen is reaching to all the cells. How carbon dioxide is going out from the body. This is what we are going to learn here. This is the process of gaseous exchange. So one part would be cellular respiration, the other is gaseous exchange or exchange of gases. Okay. If you like, you can draw a simple diagram also, or you can maybe just draw a flow chart to show the connection of different organs. First is the nose. Air from outside goes through the nose. It's called the nasal cavity here. Then it goes through pharynx. Now pharynx is that common passage through which windpipe and food pipe both pass. Okay, pharynx is the passage through which both food pipe and windpipe pass. After this you have larynx. Now larynx is your voice box. Larynx is the voice box. That means this is where your vocal cords are found. Okay, this is where your vocal cords are found. And after this you have the trachea. Trachea, or as we commonly call it as windpipe. Trachea or windpipe. ठीक है ना? So trachea or windpipe is there. This windpipe or trachea, this divides into two parts. This trachea divides into two parts called bronchi. Okay, so first you have this trachea coming down your neck, then dividing into two parts called bronchi. This bronchi further divides into smaller parts called bronchioles. So we have the trachea dividing into two, right? This further dividing into multiple parts called bronchioles, and finally these bronchioles will end in alveoli, which are air sacs. Alveoli, which are air sacs. Now these alveoli, these are the last of this chain, they have a very rich supply of blood. They have a very rich supply of blood. So what happens here with this rich supply of blood is that at blood is the interface where exchange of gases is going to take place. So I hope you remember hemoglobin. Hemoglobin attaches to oxygen. This hemoglobin, which is in the blood, it attaches to oxygen. So air from the nasal cavity down the pharynx, then larynx, then windpipe, bronchi, bronchioles. Finally, when it reaches alveoli, alveoli have a very rich supply of blood. Okay, so the air when it reaches alveoli, hemoglobin is there already waiting for oxygen. It has a very strong affinity for oxygen. So what hemoglobin is going to do is, it is going to attract the oxygen will come, attach to this hemoglobin, and then this hemoglobin will take this oxygen to all the parts of the body. So oxygen would be carried in the blood. It goes to all the different cells of your body. At the level of every cell, cellular respiration takes place. Glucose is broken down to produce energy. Carbon dioxide is produced, and then carbon dioxide would come back through this process, through blood, go to the alveoli, bronchiole, then bronchi, trachea, finally come out. So you are inhaling oxygen, you are exhaling carbon dioxide. This respiration process is to produce energy is common to all life forms. Okay, aerobic or anaerobic, but respiration would be there. Even plants are going to be doing this process. Okay, even smallest of smallest animals are going to be doing the process. Everybody needs energy for survival. Okay, just go through this. Coming to the next system, which is the excretory system. Now see, again we need to do this very briefly. We don't need a lot of details in this section, but I just want you to have some idea about all these processes so that it's like not all Greek to you. Excretory system, the two things are going to happen. Now digestion has happened, respiration has happened, different things are traveling to different parts of the body, and after everything has been utilized at different places, you know, wherever protein was needed, protein was utilized, wherever fat was needed, fat was utilized. After all that has happened, the final thing, whatever is left, is the task of waste removal. Everything which is still left and not needed by the body, that has to be removed from the body. So excretory system or excretion is going to be involving removal of wastes, and along with that there is also a regulation of amount of water. Okay, so it regulates the amount of water. Okay, This is what excretion is. Excretion basically just means removal of waste from the body, but in our case, it's also going to be regulating how much water is needed in the body. Now let's see how this works. The main organ is the kidney. Okay, this is a very simplified diagram. Main organs are the kidney. What happens is everything is being transported in the blood only. Right? Everything was traveling in the blood, every nutrient was absorbed in the blood. Blood is only taking it to different places. So the blood brings this to the kidney. Okay, the blood comes to the kidney. Now kidney's role is filtration. Kidney's role is filtration. So kidney will filter. Filter is the term which you normally understand. What do we filter when we are doing filtering anything? We keep some things and we remove what is not needed. So the kidney also does this thing. Blood passes through the kidney. The kidney goes through the blood and see if there are any useful products which are still there in the blood. If those useful products are there in the blood, they are sent back into the blood. Okay, and the rest of it is removed through the process of urine formation. Okay, so whatever is needed, that's going to be sent through the blood. Blood will be filtered, and whatever is required, that is kept, sent back into the blood. Whatever is extra, whatever is waste, whatever extra amount of water is there, that would be removed. From the kidney, there are these tubes called ureters. Then when urine is formed, it is stored in the urinary bladder, and finally it is being removed from the body. Okay. Kidney has individual units, very small, multiple number of units called nephrons. Okay, the units of excretion in kidneys, there are many of these nephrons. These are in multiple number, made up of two main parts. I'm just familiarizing you with the name. Details, I don't think they're very relevant in considering in these times, but yeah, names of these parts, they are important. They were asked also at one point of time. Glomerulus. So two parts are there in this nephron. Nephron is the unit of excretion. So kidney is made up of many number of nephrons, smaller units in the kidneys. Each of these units is going to be doing filtration. Nephron is made up of two things, Bowman's capsule and glomerulus. Okay, so it's a cup-like structure, Bowman's capsule, and then there are capillaries of blood, which is glomerulus. So blood, if you've understood, the blood is going to be coming, and blood is what you have to filter out. Okay? Kidney, the role of the kidneys is to removal of waste and then regulation of amount of water in the body. Okay? Then we have nephrons as the unit of kidney. After this, whatever is not needed in the body after filtration is done, that is removed through the process of urine or urine formation, is how this whole thing goes out of the body. Most of the wastes which we have in our body, they are nitrogenous wastes. And in human beings, it is mainly urea. So if we talk about composition of urine, 2.5% of it is urea. Urea is the main waste which we have. Other wastes are 2.5%, and the majority of this is water. Okay, 95% of this is water. Fine. Just make sure you've noted everything down. Hemoglobin takes oxygen to the cell. What brings carbon dioxide from the cells to the alveoli? See, carbon dioxide is can be attached to hemoglobin also, but then the relationship is not as strong as that of oxygen. So most of the carbon dioxide that comes back is dissolved in the blood plasma. In the liquid part of the blood, that has dissolved carbon dioxide when it comes back to the alveoli. All right? Different animals and birds can have different nitrogenous wastes. Like birds will have uric acid, right? And simpler animals, they have ammonia. So different nitrogenous products can be there as wastes. For human beings, you have to remember we have urea. Okay? All right, nervous system. Now this is something which we will do even further briefly. We're going to be doing the portions of your circulatory system and endocrine system in a little bit more detail. This doesn't really require a lot of your attention. Let me just very briefly tell you about the nervous system. I will tell you the chapters from NCERT, so if anybody has that dissatisfaction कि ऐसे कैसे आपने brain नहीं पढ़ाया and how did you not tell us the parts of the brain, then you please go and do that task at your own end. It's not really required as of how things are going these days for the purpose of UPSC exam, right? So have faith. The nervous system has two parts, central nervous system and peripheral nervous system. The central nervous system comprises of brain and spinal cord, okay? And the peripheral nervous system, it contains all the nerves. All the nerves of your body, they are a part of peripheral nervous system, and central nervous system is brain and spinal cord. So these nerves are supposed to take signals or stimulus from one place to the other. So basically everything which we are doing, that is controlled by your brain. Right from eating, right from the role of liver to pancreas to the way you speak, everything is being controlled by the brain. And that control is being achieved by having nerves in all the parts of the body. So it's basically the system of nerves is to send signals. There are two types of these nerves, or we can say peripheral nervous system. It will be of two types. One is sensory. The other one is motor. Okay, sensory nerves and motor nerves. Sensory nerves are those which take signals to the central nervous system. Okay, sensory nerves take signals to the central nervous system, and motor nerves bring signals from the central nervous system. Okay, let me just simplify this a little bit. Now this is a very crude way to explain it, but I guess even at the cost of oversimplification, let me explain this to you. So suppose there is a hot object, right? And I'm putting my hand on that hot object. So there are nerve endings at the tip of my fingers. These nerves are going to understand that, okay, this is hot, or they're going to take the signal, take this input that, okay, there's a hot object. They're going to take this signal and through sensory nerves, take this to my central nervous system. because sensory nerves take the signals to the central nervous system. Now in the central nervous system, that means in my brain, the processing will take place and the brain will decide what action has to be taken. So the brain has processed that, okay, this is a hot object, and the brain sends back a signal through the motor nerves. The motor nerves bring signals from the central nervous system. Okay, from the central nervous system, the motor nerves will bring the signal and it is going to be brought back to the tip of my hand through motor nerves. And what is going to be that signal? That this is a hot object, please remove your hand. And then I can go ahead and remove my hand. This is how this system of nerves works. Okay, this is a very broad overview, just to give you a very rough idea about what is the purpose and what is the idea of the nervous system. Further details from the perspective of the exam are not needed. So we will not talk about that. After this, we have another question. Where does filtering of air, as it contains all gases, or do we inhale only oxygen? No, Tanvi, we do not inhale only oxygen. What is happening is you're taking in all the gases, but here comes the role of oxygen. Here comes the role of hemoglobin. Hemoglobin has the strongest affinity or the strongest attraction for oxygen. So out of that whole mix of air, hemoglobin will just extract oxygen and the rest of it is going to be removed or sent back. Okay, that's how it works. All right. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a break here and we will be continuing after the break. Okay, the rest of the topic is going to need a little bit more elaboration, so I want to take that in one go. Okay. All right, so we're going to go into the next system, which is the system of transportation. Okay, Kapil is asking, what is plant-based vaccine? See, plant-based vaccine is also an upcoming concept. They're trying it for COVID also. In this, basically what they are doing is the antigen which is involved in the vaccine, that is being introduced into the plants, different plants, and potato and corn and such plants. They are trying to do this. This is basically, the idea is of recombinant biotechnology, and we're going to study recombinant biotechnology. It will become more clear. So basically the antigen, like suppose the virus is involved against whom we are seeking to develop a vaccine, that is introduced in a plant and then that's taken as a vaccine. Okay. All right. So we spoke about blood, we spoke about the idea of how everything from your food to your nutrients to oxygen, everything is traveling through blood. Now the blood and its movement is controlled by the heart. So your heart is the main part, the main portion of the circulatory system. So heart, along with a number of blood vessels which are there, they together make this whole system work. Let's very simply see the structure of the heart, right? This is the picture you know of the heart, right? Okay, so it's going to be divided into 4 parts. There are 4 chambers of the heart. Whenever we are drawing any diagram of the body, we imagine this is how the person is standing. Like if this is my heart, so this would be the right side and this one would be the left side. So that's how we are going to mark it here. This is the left and this is the right. So the different parts of your heart, the upper 2 parts or the upper 2 chambers, they are called auricles, or the other word is atrium. Auricles or atrium, and the lower parts are called ventricle. 4 chambers, 4 parts of the heart. Now based on this, we can call each of these based on left or right. So this is right auricle, below it is the right ventricle, then here we have the left ventricle and the left auricle. Okay, now see this actual structure, right? Not the ones we draw, that this is the actual structure. This is the heart being cut in between. Okay, it's been cut open so that we can see the different chambers. So see, this is right atrium, below this the longer chamber, right ventricle, and this is the left ventricle, and here we have the left auricle, but it is not visible because of the blood vessels which are there. Okay, 4 chambers, 4 parts, 4 compartments of the heart. The heart is basically a muscle and it is going to contract and expand to allow movement of blood to take place. Now talking about these blood vessels, there are 2 main types of blood vessels. One is your artery, the other one is the vein. The artery and the vein. Arteries are blood vessels which take blood away from the heart. We're going to see the function of different arteries right now. We're going to see how circulation works. Veins, on the other hand, bring blood towards the heart. Any blood vessel which is taking blood away from the heart, we're going to say that is the artery, and any blood vessel which is bringing blood towards the heart, we're going to call it the vein. Okay. Most of your arteries are deep-seated and the veins are superficial. So any blood vessels which you can see, right, like on your hand, or maybe the back of your arm, anywhere you see, all of these are veins. Okay, arteries we cannot as such see because arteries will be deep-seated. Veins on the other hand are superficial. Arteries for that matter are reddish in color and veins are bluish green. So you've seen the veins, so you know they are bluish green in color. Okay. Whenever you have to give blood for any reason, so it's taken from your veins, right? If you have to get a test done or anything like that, it's taken out from your veins. So these veins, one advantage is that they are superficial. The second thing is that they are also thin-walled. The veins are thin-walled as opposed to the arteries which are thick-walled. The arteries which are thick-walled. Okay. So this is the basic point of distinction between different blood vessels. Now let's see how they are doing their job. We are going to understand the circulation of blood. I'm expecting you to draw this whole thing. This is important for you to understand how this whole system is working. So you have to draw. The best way to do it is draw a flow chart like this one, just like they have drawn it. Because otherwise, if you have to understand the same thing with that diagram of the heart, it becomes more difficult. So a flowchart works well. Sorry. We're going to see how blood is moving through the different parts of the body. We have already understood the process of gaseous exchange, right? what happens to oxygen in the body. So based on that only we are going to be studying the circulation. We'll start with the lungs. Lungs are bringing us oxygen. This oxygen is going to be attached to the blood, to the hemoglobin, and when that happens we call it oxygenated blood. Okay, we call it oxygenated blood. So oxygenated blood from the lungs goes to the left side of the heart. And in the left side, first the upper chamber, which is auricle, then the lower chamber, ventricle. That's how the movement takes place. Lungs, left side, okay, left auricle, then left ventricle. What is the kind of blood? Oxygenated blood, because lungs are bringing us oxygen. Now, this blood vessel, which is bringing blood to the heart, right? It is going to be a vein, right? Veins bring blood to the heart. So this is going to be done by a vein. This is pulmonary vein. Pulmonary, if you remember, we studied tuberculosis also. Anything associated with lungs is pulmonary. Okay? Pulmonary vein. Pulmonary vein brings oxygenated blood from the lungs to the left side of the heart. First the upper chamber, left auricle, then the lower chamber, left ventricle. Okay? From the left ventricle, now the blood is going to go into all the different parts of the body. Why? Because all the parts need this oxygen. For cellular respiration, it is going to take place at every cell's level. Okay, at the level of all cells, cellular respiration is going to take place. Right? So, what is going to happen is that left ventricle will pump blood out. Okay, it's going to pump blood out, and that blood goes to all the parts of the body. This blood is oxygenated blood. So a blood vessel is taking blood away from the heart. So this is going to be an artery. The name of the artery is aorta. So aorta is an artery which takes oxygenated blood from the left side of the heart, left ventricle, to all parts of the body. I mean, it will further divide, right? It will divide further, smaller arteries going to each organ. That is going to be like a meshwork of different blood vessels, but the main artery is aorta. Okay? Now, in the body, respiration has taken place. Glucose, we just studied that in respiration. Glucose will use oxygen, carbon dioxide will be formed. So now the blood has lost its oxygen. It's now deoxygenated blood. Okay. This deoxygenated blood from all the parts of the body goes to the right side of the heart. Again, first the upper chamber, right auricle, then the lower chamber, right ventricle. And because it is, the blood is coming towards the heart, right? Towards the heart means that this is a vein. The name of this vein is vena cava. So there are two of these, inferior and superior vena cava is there. Okay, and they are taking deoxygenated blood from all parts of the body to the right side of the heart. Right auricle, right ventricle. Now from right ventricle, the blood has to go back to the lungs. This blood is deoxygenated, right? So taking blood away from the heart, that means this is the job of an artery. Going towards the lungs, so this is pulmonary artery. Okay? So you need to have an idea how this circulation works. You need to know the names of the different blood vessels. I have given the name to this as double circulation. Why double circulation? Because you can see blood will go through the heart twice. First it goes through the left side, then it goes through the right side. So two cycles, double circulation. The second way to see it is, in one part the lungs are involved, we call it pulmonary circulation. In the second part, the bodies or the different systems of the body are involved, we call it systemic circulation. Okay? I will repeat this whole thing. Please draw this, write all of these, write the names of the blood vessels. I am going to repeat the cycle once more. Lungs, lungs bring in oxygen, oxygen goes into the blood, blood is oxygenated. Pulmonary vein carries blood to the left side of the heart. First the upper chamber, left auricle, then the lower chamber, left ventricle. After this, the oxygenated blood goes to all the different parts of the body, right? And in all the different parts of the body, it is first being carried by an artery called aorta. In the body, oxygen is utilized. The blood now does not contain oxygen. It is called deoxygenated blood. From all the parts of the body, vena cava are veins which collect the blood, bring it to the right side of the heart. First the upper chamber, right auricle, then the lower chamber, right ventricle. From the right ventricle, pulmonary artery takes deoxygenated blood back to the lungs. In the lungs, again the same process will be repeated. Oxygen from the alveoli will go bind into your hemoglobin, the blood will be oxygenated, and the whole process will be repeated. Okay, so just make sure you have understood. Okay, so I've been asked why are the veins bluish green. Okay, so to make you understand this, I am going to put in another point of difference between arteries and veins. Arteries mostly will carry oxygenated blood except for the pulmonary artery. Okay, so all your arteries will carry oxygenated blood except for pulmonary artery. This is responsible for the red color. Okay, this is responsible for the red color. Veins, on the other hand, carry deoxygenated blood except for pulmonary vein. Except for pulmonary vein, all your veins will have deoxygenated blood, and it is presence of this deoxygenated blood which is giving this bluish color to your veins. Okay. Okay, so Keshav has asked me one application type of question where he says that some injections are given in the vein and some are given in the muscles, right? So we use the terms I am intramuscular, right? And IV, intravenous. These are the two types of injections you've heard about. Now, the simple logic of this is that if we have to give something directly into the blood, we are going to give it in the veins, right? Whatever we are giving in the muscle, that will also ultimately go in the blood only, because that's where we want to send it. But the thing is that when we are giving it in the muscle, it is going to take a little bit more time. It is going to take more time from the muscle to go into the blood vessel. But if it is in the vein, it is directly acting. Now, how do we decide which is the way to go? See, if we want very instantaneous action, quick action, like suppose if you are giving a painkiller to a patient, so if you give it in an IV form, okay, it is going to have immediate results. Very quickly it is going to act. But if you give it in intramuscular form, it's going to take more time. Right? It's going to take more time. So whatever we need to quickly give it to the patient, right? We want it to make its effect soon. We can give it in IV. When we have a little bit more time, we can use IM. The advantage of IM or its consideration of IM is that the risk factor is less. Okay. Sometimes a patient might have a reaction against a particular drug. So intravenous may you don't get a lot of time. Or while the injection is being given, if it is directly in blood, if there is something wrong with the needle or if there is any infection or open sores or blood vessel would be ruptured, then that danger is more in intravenous. In IM, in intramuscular, that danger is reduced because the contact with direct blood is not there in this case. Right? That's how this whole thing works. Okay. So after this, let's talk about blood in particular. What is blood and how this whole system of blood is going to be playing its part. We have seen how blood is transported. Now let's talk about the different parts of the blood. So blood is basically a red circulating liquid in the body, right? This blood has two parts. One is plasma. Plasma is the liquid part. We can call it a straw colored liquid. Straw colored liquid. And the second part is the blood cells. The different cells found in the blood. Right? Plasma, it is the liquid medium. The cells are also found in this. Everything that is dissolved in blood is dissolved in plasma. And it has a special property of containing proteins. So there are blood plasma proteins which are found here. Okay, blood plasma proteins. Please keep writing this down. Blood has two components, plasma and cells. The plasma is a straw colored liquid and the plasma contains proteins. There are three proteins in plasma. The first protein is globulin. The first protein is globulin. Globulin, please write down along with globulin. Globulin is needed. Globulin is needed to provide defense mechanism to the body. So these are defense proteins. Second one is albumin. Albumin helps to maintain the blood pressure. Proteins are needed to maintain consistency, to maintain pressure of the blood. So albumin maintains pressure of the blood. And then the third one, fibrinogen. It is involved in formation of blood clots. Okay, so plasma proteins, we studied this as an example of our globular proteins also when we were studying proteins in your first class. So these are further the names of these plasma proteins and what they are doing in the body. Fine. Let's now talk about the cells. The first cells are platelets. First type of blood cells, platelets. They are the smallest of the type, platelets. Platelets are involved in the clotting of blood. So what normally happens is, once a blood vessel is injured, okay, so blood has this cell platelet. So this platelet is stimulated. Okay, platelet is stimulated and it activates different proteins. So fibrinogen is one of those proteins. This process of activation also requires vitamin K. If you remember, we've studied vitamin K also. So vitamin K is also needed in the process, and this fibrinogen then goes through a series of changes and finally a blood clot is formed. The nature of the blood clot is also proteinaceous. It is a form of protein only, starting with this blood plasma protein fibrinogen. The whole reaction is stimulated by the platelets. Okay? So if platelets are going to be less, blood clotting will be challenging. After this, these platelets, you can write down, are also called thrombocytes. Second type of cells, red blood cells or RBCs, or as they are called, erythrocytes. Erythrocytes, that is another name for red blood cells or RBCs. Red blood cells or RBCs. They contain hemoglobin. Hemoglobin contains iron. They contain hemoglobin, and this hemoglobin contains iron. It's actually the red color is because of presence of this iron. Then one more important feature of red blood cells is that they are enucleated. They have no nucleus. And they have a lifespan of 120 days. a lifespan of 120 days. So after 120 days, the red blood cells will automatically die. Okay. What is the function of red blood cells? You know the function of red blood cells now. It is gaseous exchange. Or you can simply write down hemoglobin transports oxygen. Hemoglobin transports oxygen. And hemoglobin is found in red blood cells. So transport of oxygen is the main function here. Platelets or thrombocytes, clotting of blood, erythrocytes, transport of oxygen. Then you have white blood cells. White blood cells. They are called leukocytes. Leukocytes. They are of two types. One is agranulocytes and the second one is granulocytes. Agranulocytes or granulocytes. Now what is the meaning of this? Some of these white blood cells, right, like this was the nucleus, some of these have granules. So if they have granules, they are called granulocytes. If they do not have granules, they are called agranulocytes. So if you've written white blood cells, then you've written leukocytes. After this, write down agranulocytes. Agranulocytes. They do not contain granules in their cytoplasm. They do not contain granules in their cytoplasm. First one, lymphocytes. Lymphocytes. And lymphocytes you already know. You can write this down also. Lymphocytes are involved in acquired immunity. Lymphocytes are involved in acquired immunity. Then we have monocytes. Monocytes. Monocytes are involved in innate immunity. Monocytes are involved in innate immunity. Cellular defense in innate immunity. Then agranulocytes. First one is, first write down for granulocytes. Granulocytes contain pigmented granules. Granulocytes contain granules in their cytoplasm. They contain granules in their cytoplasm. First one, eosinophils. Eosinophils responsible for allergic reactions. Whenever there is an allergy, so in that case eosinophils increase in number and they produce certain products to counter that allergic reaction. Eosinophils involved in allergy. Then basophils. Basophils, inflammatory reactions. I hope you remember inflammation. Inflammatory reactions. Basophil, inflammatory reaction. and neutrophils, cellular defenses in innate immunity. Cellular defenses in innate immunity. Okay. So see, if we have to check for infection, basically all of your white blood cell is for managing the defense of the body, right? So that's why we studied these in your immunity portion. So what we do is, when we have to get, when your doctor asks you to get a blood test done, so usually this is one of the things which is checked. And what is the number of white blood cells? Okay, so if white blood cells number is increased, so that will give us an indication that some problem, some infection is there, right? We can also do a differential white blood cell count, a differential leukocyte count, right? Leukocytes. What does that mean? That we can see the number of different white blood cells, and based on which one has increased, we can get a further idea about what is the kind of situation. Suppose basophils have increased. So we will get an idea that, okay, some inflammation is taking place in some part of the body. And then obviously correlating it with the symptoms of a person, we get an idea about what kind of a situation is there in the body. Okay? So just see if you have understood anything, everything. You know all this from school also, but if there are any doubts, please ask. When you're asking your doubts, make sure you're going to your doubts, through the doubt section of your portal, and that's where you're asking your doubts. Okay, so Advait has asked that in dengue, the blood platelet count is reduced. So see, dengue is a virus, and this virus is known to destroy the platelets. That's the role which the virus is playing in the body. It is destroying the platelets. Not only that it is destroying the platelets, but it is also preventing formation of platelets in the body. So that's why the number of platelets in the person keeps on falling until the infection is controlled. So sometimes what is done is platelets from another person are given to make sure that the person's platelet count does not become very, very low, right? Why not give injection in artery? Because we cannot locate the artery, right? You cannot see your artery. It's not locatable. It's not closer to the surface of your body. So we'll have to do a surgical operation first, cut open your arm, then reach the artery, and then give an injection. That is not an easy task. For an injection, you would not want to have surgery. So the better option is to do it in a vein. What is a blood thinner? See, in a lot of heart diseases, people are put on blood thinners, right? Basically, these are anticoagulants. What does that mean? That blood sometimes in certain conditions has a possibility of coagulating or clotting more than it is expected or more than the normal process requires it to be. So for that purpose, we are putting a patient on drugs which will prevent a coagulation or clotting of blood. Right? That is what is a blood thinner. So see, Aniti has asked what is the consequence of high platelets and low platelets. All of these blood cells, be it red cells, be it white cells, platelets, they have different manifestations in the form of different diseases, and there are terms also, right? Like thrombocytopenia is a term, variation of platelets, it is there. So if you have to like correlate it with a particular condition in one type of blood cell, so just correlate it with its function. Okay, that what is the function it is doing in the body. So accordingly, what is going to happen if it is increased, accordingly what will happen is if it decreases. The increase or decrease of these blood cells is not a normal condition. It's not that it can have normal variations. The variation level is fixed and it is supposed to stay at that level only. If it goes more than that level or it comes down lesser than that level, then if you are talking about platelets, then blood will unnecessarily start clotting. That would be one situation, or the blood clot will not be there. So that means that blood loss will be there. Both of these conditions would be amounting to some diseases. Okay, this is a diseased condition. This is not like a normal variation which takes place in the body. Please explain inflammatory reaction. When we were studying hepatitis, we did talk about inflammation, right? I wrote that down also. There are 5 things which are happening in inflammation, and those 5 things are redness, swelling, pain, loss of function, and increased body temperature. All of these is what is happening in the body in inflammation. It is basically a protective mechanism against some form of infection or some condition of wear and tear which is there in the body. You don't actually need to know how the reaction works or how that system works. This is not really needed. What is cellular defense? Cellular defense is a cell giving you defense. When we wrote innate immunity, we wrote about cellular defenses. One of the examples of innate immunity, there were 3 examples: barrier protection, right? Physical barrier, chemical barrier, and cellular defense. When the cells are providing you innate immunity, we call that cellular defense. We have done all of this. Glomerulus is not a part of the nephron. Is this a question or is this a statement? I think glomerulus is a part of the nephron only, nephron structure. Red blood cell is a cell without the nucleus. Yes, it is because of, why it is because without the nucleus is because all the space inside the cell is filled up by hemoglobin. The hemoglobin takes up all the space, there is no space for the nucleus to be present, and that is why this cell dies after 120 days. So it has limited lifespan. Its only job is to go around, take that hemoglobin, attach oxygen to it and transport it. So it's not doing any other function. So it can survive without the nucleus also. What do you mean by a heart attack? Okay, so I guess everybody is now interested in physiology and diseases. That is actually really beyond the scope of my discussion here in the class, right? Basically, you can just understand is that because of any reason, your heart is now not functioning, or for that moment when you have an heart attack, the blood flow is not there, blood flow is disrupted. Okay, that's how you can simply understand it. And Vivek, we did discuss what could be one of the possible causes of your heart attack, and that was the blockages that take place in your arteries. If you remember, we did that when we studied trans fats. If those blockages in the arteries are in those arteries which are supplying blood to the heart, right? The heart muscle will also need it, blood itself will also need to produce energy. So if those are obstructed and the heart is not able to get its oxygen supply, then that is one of the most befitting conditions for a heart attack, where the blood supply or the supply of oxygen or the supply of energy would be disrupted. Okay. So now we have to do one very important topic, which also is a source of questions, not only in UPSC, but invariably in any exam which you will choose to write. Very important. It can be very confusing also, so please pay a little attention. What are the different problems in high and low white blood cells? Okay, I'm not going to tell you this. Gajanan, okay, please look that up. White blood cells are supposed to provide you with defense, protection, immunity. So if their number is reduced, so you will be less prone. If their number is increased, that will also not be in a normal condition but will be associated with the disease. Some form of cancer might be there. Blood cancer is one condition where blood cells are increased in number, uncontrollable growth is there. In that case also they will not be able to normally do their function, impacting the whole body. You have to control your tendency to become a doctor, right? This is for all of you. This is general studies. Let's keep it general, generic. I know there's a natural tendency, natural curiosity is there. But if you keep doing this and if you keep thinking on those lines, this is the Wikipedia syndrome, I call it. What happens is, UPSC aspirants, they want to know everything and they want to know everything in detail because they feel like this is the perfect preparation which we are going to have and I will leave no stone unturned. So they open one page on Wikipedia. Then there are other blue words which are there. So click on that, like that you have 100 pages opened and just to look up one definition, you have already wasted 5 hours. Please resist those tendencies which take you into things. You don't need to have perfect knowledge about everything. Okay, you need to have an idea about everything, but there is no scope of going into the depths of every aspect of these things. Fine, just take this from the point of view of the exam. Marxism, okay, the logic of getting marks. Just prioritize on that. Look at the kind of questions which are being asked. Look at what you are reading in current affairs and just control yourself. Okay. Now please focus, switch on all your engines, as I say, and understand this. This is a very important concept. If you don't understand this, you will not be able to solve a question. This is an application-based concept. Blood groups are determined by certain antigens which are present on the surface of red blood cells. We are going to first talk about the ABO type of blood group. Okay, the ABO type we call it, and in this there are 4 blood groups. You commonly know that A, B, AB and O. So, A, B, AB and O. Okay, the 4 blood groups. They have antigens on the surface of red blood cells. And they have a capacity to produce antibodies which are released in the plasma. When I use the word antigen, okay, it antigen was something which is going to stimulate an immune response, right? It is a property which stimulates the immune response. So when an antigen is present in the blood of a person, or say what the antigen which is present in my blood, that will not stimulate my immune system, right? The viral antigen, the antigens which are present on the virus's body, they are not a threat to his own immune system. They are a threat to your immune system. So this antigen or the antigenic role as we understand it, that comes into play when this blood goes into somebody else's body. Okay, in your body it stays there, your body recognizes it as self. The body has this property of differentiating self versus non-self. So even when antigens are present, the reaction or the stimulation of the immune system would be there only in case of the non-self, when this blood goes into somebody else's body. Based on what antigen is present, each blood group gets its name. A blood group has an antigen A. B blood group has an antigen B. AB is a type of blood group which has both A and B. So two antigens are present here. And O blood group does not contain any antigen. So you can equate it to 0 or none. Okay. Now see these pictures of red blood cells, right? You can see these red blood cells, and on the surface of these red blood cells antigens are present. So A blood group में antigen one particular type, it is called antigen A. B में it is a different type of antigen, a different shape, different structure. So this is antigen B. AB has both the types as you can see here, and O has none. Okay. So different antigens are there on the surface of red blood cells in different blood groups, and they determine the blood group. Okay. Now if there is an antigen, that means there would be an antibody which would be produced, because in response to antigens, antibodies are there, right? Now a blood group cannot produce antibodies against its own blood, right? If this is an antigen A, the blood group A will not produce antibody against this blood group. Why? Because then it will destroy its own cell. This is how the protection of self and non-self works. That it does not have the capacity to produce antibodies against its own antigen. So A blood group has antigen A, that means it cannot produce antibody A, but it can produce antibody B. So whenever it gets a chance, antibody B can be produced. Antibody A will not be produced because then the whole blood will be destroyed. So similarly, B blood group has antibody A. B blood group has antibody A. AB, because it has A also, it has B also. So it will not have any antibody. It's not that it will not have any antibody. We are just talking in reference to blood groups, the blood group antibodies. Okay. All other type of antibodies, if COVID infection is there, COVID antibodies or any other thing which is there, those antibodies would be there. But here we are just talking in the reference of ABO blood group type. O, because it has no antigen, there is no problem. It can have both the antibodies, anti-A and anti-B. Okay. Anti-A, anti-B, both of these could be found in blood group O. Okay. Now see one more type, like ABO type. Give this a few more minutes. You will understand how the working of this whole antigen antibody is there. Like ABO type, we have another antigen called RH factor. RH factor, or the full form is rhesus factor. This is another type of antigen which is found on the surface of RBCs. It also gives an additional identity to your red blood cells, giving us the positive or negative blood groups. So you might be aware, I mean not might be, I am very certain that you are aware that your blood group says you are O positive or A positive or AB negative, whatever that is there. For that a separate antigen is there. Like here we've discussed two antigens, A and B. So a third antigen is there in these two blood groups, positive blood group and negative blood group. Antigen and antibody. Antigen's name is RH antigen. Okay, the RH factor, we can also call it RH antigen. So in positive blood group, RH antigen is present. In negative blood group, it is absent. So that means if RH factor is present in a blood group, we say it is positive blood group. If RH factor is not there, we say it is negative blood group. So in the positive blood group, as RH factor is there, the antibody against it will not be there. So here no antibody against RH. But if there is no antigen, we can have the antibody. So here we have anti-RH antibody. Till here, I hope it's fine. Now let's talk about blood transfusion. This is where this whole game comes into play. What do we mean by blood transfusion? It means transfer of blood from one part of the system to the other, one person to the other when you have to give blood. Right? Why would we need to do it? Maybe there is a disease condition, maybe there is a case of accident where most commonly it is there that a lot of blood loss is there. So in those cases we will have to give blood from one person to the other. And you are also aware that when we have to give blood to somebody, there is a blood matching which is done. Okay, and I am going to teach you now how that blood matching is done. Have a look here. I'm going to tell you a very simplified logic with, if you can just remember that and focus on that, you will never get any question of blood grouping to be wrong. Just remember this. The person who gives blood is called the donor. The person who gives blood is called the donor, and the person who receives blood is called the recipient. So when we have to match our blood for the donor, okay, donor's blood is going to go into the body of the recipient. Okay, so donor's antigen is important because antigen will stimulate the immune system. Whose immune system? The recipient's immune system, because recipient is getting this blood. So donor's antigen has to be considered, and what antibody the recipient can make, that has to be considered. Okay, because see, donor has given the blood, right? So there it has now nothing to do with his body. So his immune system is not involved in this case. Whose immune system is involved? The recipient who is getting the blood. So the recipient's immune system will produce antibodies. Against what? Against the antigen. Against the antigen which comes in, the recipient's body will produce antibodies. But we have already established which blood group has which antigen and which antibody it can make. This is fixed. Okay, this you learn, this you remember. And if you know this, you can just use this logic, donor, recipient, antigen, antibody, and you can solve any kind of a blood transfusion puzzle. I'm going to do a few for you. Okay, just listen carefully. Suppose my donor, okay, my donor has a blood group A, okay, and my recipient has blood group B. Fine. So now what happens is, donor ke liye I have written, look for the antigen. A blood group has antigen A. B blood group is the recipient. Recipient ke liye I have written, look for antibodies. So antibody in B is anti-A. Anti-A antibody will destroy antigen A. Right? It is the antibody against antigen A. So this transfusion will not be successful. Okay. Now let me change the donor. Instead of A, if I have O and B remains the same. Now O has which antigen? O has none. Okay. B again same anti-A. But it doesn't really matter. B can produce any antibody, but there are no antigens, so what will it react with? Antibody will only react when there is an antigen present, but there is no antigen, so no problem. Blood transfusion will smoothly go through. It will be successful. Right? Let's take one more example. So we again keep A as our donor, and instead of B, now we have AB. Okay, we have AB as the recipient. So A blood group, antigen A, donor ka antigen, right? And AB is the recipient, so what antibodies it can produce? AB will produce none of the antibodies. So again, irrespective of what antigen is there is no problem because no antibodies are produced. Again, blood transfusion will go through. Okay? So this is blood transfusion. The logic in the RH factor also will be the same. If you have to see for RH factor also, the same logic you use. Donor, antigen, recipient, antibody. Just remember this, you will be able to solve all kinds of questions. Okay? Alright. So, this is one UPSC question which I want you to solve. Okay, this is a standard pattern of UPSC which is there, and Nikhil, if you can just call me, I just want to talk to you for a minute. Till that time, you people please solve this question and send me your answers. Okay, so we have answers from Vasudha, which is B. Okay, I have answers as B. Gopal, Abhishek, Seepaj, everybody says it is B. Fine. Let's see if it should be B. See, when you try to do a question like this orally, you have a very high probability of doing this incorrectly also. Fine. So, please write down that logic of donor and recipient and then go through with it. Fine. So, let me read out the question. The answer I would like to very nicely tell you is not correct. Tanvi also says it's B. Chalo. Let's see. A man whose blood group is not known meets with a serious accident and needs blood transfusion immediately. Which one of the blood groups mentioned below and readily available in the hospital will be safe for transfusion? So, you have a recipient, whose blood group is not known. And for recipient, we have established that we have to see the antibody. So we do not know which antibodies are here. Okay. They are asking us about the donor, that who should donate blood. Okay, who should be the person who should donate blood. Now because the antibody is not known to us, so in order for the transfusion to go through, we have to find a blood group which does not have any antigen. Okay, we need a condition where antigens are absent, because if antigens are absent, what is going to happen is that it will not make a difference on whatever antibodies are there. Whatever antibodies would be there, irrespective of that, the blood transfusion will go through because there are no antigens. For a reaction to take place, you need both the things, right? Antibodies and antigens, both you need. So, we will have to look for a blood group where there are no antigens, right? So, I will take you to my tables to find that blood group. In ABO type, which is a blood group which does not have any antigen, it is blood group O, right? Blood group O you all have identified, but what you have not identified is here. How can you say positive blood group? Positive blood group has Rh antigen, and if the blood of the recipient has antibody Rh, then this transfusion will not go through, right? There's going to be a reaction if that blood of the recipient has anti-Rh. Okay, so we need a blood group without an antigen, and that is the negative blood group. So the answer will be O negative, which is your A option. And Shubham, Rajbala, Shagun, Advait, Manu, Hamid, Vanshika, Deepak, all of them have given the correct answer A. So that's actually a very good thing. Answer is A. This also takes us to another important point, that O negative blood group is actually the universal donor. It can donate blood to any blood group because it has no antigen. If you have to find out a universal recipient, that blood group which will be able to receive blood from all blood types, that is going to be a blood group which has no antibodies. If a blood group has no antibodies, it will be the most perfect recipient because there will be no scope for reaction in any way. So, a blood group with no antibodies is your blood group AB positive. So, AB positive becomes the universal recipient and O negative becomes the universal donor. If you just have to talk in terms of O and AB, so O is your universal donor and AB is the universal recipient. If we have to include the RH factor also, then O negative and your AB positive. Answer is A. Okay. Please make it a point that you have understood this answer correctly, like Gopal and his confusion. So Gopal first says O positive is a universal donor. Why he has said this is because Gopal has not tried to solve it. He has only taken an estimation of what he thinks he remembers, and then he changed his answer 3 minutes later. Maybe it is A. So yes, Gopal, you are right the second time. It is A. A is the correct answer. All right. Okay, so I hope this topic is clear. This will come and disturb you at many places, a very common type of question in many exams. So please make sure you've understood, especially if you couldn't solve the question or if you didn't try to solve, take another minute to see that it's clear. Let's come to our next system. This system also we are required to do in a little bit more detail, and this is your system of hormones. But before we go there, we have to understand the basics of the different types of glands which are available. So in your body, there are two types of glands. One are called the exocrine gland or exocrine glands, and the second one are endocrine glands. This is the system we are interested in. But in order to understand this, we first need to have some idea about this. So remember the liver, pancreas, we just discussed those. They are giving some secretions, they are producing some things. They are exocrine glands. What does this mean? That the gland produces certain secretions, certain chemicals, and then there is a duct or a tube which takes it to the other gland. Like we had liver, okay, and then bile was being produced, it went to gallbladder, and then it went to small intestine through a duct or a tube. And this one was called bile duct, right? So those glands which have a tube to take their secretions to the other gland, they're called exocrine glands, okay? This is just for your understanding. This is not a part of our discussion. This is what we want. There are some other glands which do not have ducts. We call these as ductless glands. We call these as ductless glands. There are no ducts, but they are making some secretions. They are producing some chemicals, and these chemicals are called hormones. We've heard hormones, right? These hormones release their secretions directly into blood. Okay, these hormones release their secretions directly into blood because they do not have ducts. They are ductless glands, they release their secretions into blood. Right? And then blood can hence take it into any part of the body where it is supposed to go. Okay, so it travels through blood, it is there in blood, and it is called hormones. Fine. Basically, the job of this endocrine system is to control and coordinate, and it does a very vast variety of functions. We're going to talk about all the endocrine glands, what are the hormones produced by them, what is their function. We are going to discuss all of that. But before we go into that, I want you to write down about the endocrine system. The endocrine system is meant for internal communication and regulation of the human body. Internal communication and regulation of the human body. Hormones are the secretions of endocrine glands. Hormones are the secretion of endocrine glands which do not have ducts, and secrete directly to the blood, secrete directly into the blood to be transported to distantly located target organs. Okay. So now what we're going to do is we are going to discuss the different endocrine glands one by one. Fine. And we also have to write down about their hormones and the functions. Now see, this is the picture of your different endocrine glands in the body. So we have hypothalamus and pituitary. They are parts of the brain. Then in the neck you have thyroid. Above the thyroid is the parathyroid gland. Then we have adrenal glands which are placed above your kidneys. After this, pancreas. Now pancreas is one special gland. If you remember, we saw that pancreas is producing enzymes also, and it is producing hormones also. So both exocrine and endocrine. It is called a mixed gland. Okay, it is called a mixed gland. Why? Because it has both exocrine and endocrine parts. Okay. After this you have ovaries and testes. Now obviously this is just a diagrammatic explanation. Any human being cannot have both testes or ovaries. They'll have either one of them. Both of these are called gonads. Okay, they are called gonads, and they are sex organs in your body. The female sex organ is ovary, the male sex organ is testis. And these sex organs, they produce sex hormones. Okay, they produce sex hormones and they are called gonads. The reproductive parts of your body, they are called gonads. Fine. The hormones produced also, because we will not be going into the detail of these. You can just maybe know the names. I guess you already know the name. For testis, you have testosterone. For ovaries, you have estrogen. They're basically required to maintain the sexual characters in an organism. Okay. And female hormone and male hormone. Alright. We will start though with the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus its role is to stimulate the pituitary gland. So there are glands which have a function of stimulating other endocrine glands. So hypothalamus stimulates the pituitary gland. How? It does that through two hormones. So let's write down about the hormones of hypothalamus. First one, write down releasing hormone. Write down releasing hormone. First write down hypothalamus, then write down releasing hormone. Then after that write down it stimulates the secretions. It stimulates the secretions from the pituitary gland. It stimulates the secretions from the pituitary gland. And there is another hormone called inhibiting hormone. Inhibiting hormone. This, write down, inhibiting hormone inhibits the secretions from the pituitary gland. Inhibiting hormone inhibits the secretions from the pituitary gland. So when the hypothalamus will give its releasing hormone, pituitary will start giving its hormones. And after that, when the hypothalamus gives inhibiting hormone, the pituitary gland will stop doing its job, stop releasing its hormones. Okay? This pituitary gland, we divide it into two parts, the front part and the part behind it. We call these as anterior and posterior. Anterior and posterior parts, two parts of the pituitary gland. Both of these parts will produce their separate hormones. Okay, both of these parts will produce their separate set of hormones. First we will discuss anterior pituitary. This is a very important gland. This was supposedly a very favorite of UPSC also. It is a master gland. It's called a master endocrine gland because a very long list of hormones is there which are produced from anterior pituitary. Okay, let's start. First one is called the growth hormone. Growth hormone. And if you can just understand from its name, growth hormone is for the growth and development of the body. Growth hormone is for the growth and development of the body. Basically, the most common way in which we can see the effect of this growth hormone is in your height. So, there are two conditions. Giants and dwarfs. Giants and dwarfs, right? Right? Or you can say gigantism, dwarfism. So, see, the question is not going to be direct. So you have to understand the application of these hormones also. If this growth hormone is in excess, the person becomes a giant. Okay, and if this hormone is deficient, the person becomes a dwarf. Right? So people like, say, Khali, right? If you know about Khali, then he is one character who is supposedly this large because of presence of extra growth hormone in his body. Or all those people in the circus or anywhere else which we see, which you say bonnet, right? Or the dwarf, or the little people, they are so because of the absence of or the reduced amount of growth hormone. Okay. Let's talk about the next hormone, prolactin. Prolactin, this is for, please write down, prolactin is for production of milk or milk formation. Formation of milk. Prolactin for formation of milk. Then we have thyroid stimulating hormone. Thyroid stimulating hormone. So the name should make it clear. Thyroid gland is going to be stimulated. So it is abbreviated as TSH. Okay. So you can write down, it stimulates the thyroid gland. It stimulates the thyroid gland to release its secretion. It stimulates the thyroid gland to release its secretions. Then you have luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone, or it is abbreviated as LH. Luteinizing hormone or LH. This luteinizing hormone stimulates the gonads, stimulates your gonads to release the sex hormones. To release the sex hormones. Then you have follicle stimulating hormone. Follicle stimulating hormone, or it is going to be abbreviated as FSH. FSH. So the ovary has follicles. Okay, the ovary contains follicles, and these follicles will mature and form eggs. Those eggs which will be used for reproduction then. So FSH helps in maturation of these follicles and also in sperm formation. Sperm formation in males. So write down, FSH helps in the maturation of ovarian follicles and sperm formation. The last one from anterior pituitary, adrenocorticotrophic hormone. Adrenocorticotrophic hormone, ACTH. ACTH stimulates the adrenal gland. Okay, the adrenal gland. The adrenal gland to release its secretions. adrenocorticotropic hormone stimulates the adrenal gland to release its secretions. Fine. After this, we go to posterior pituitary. Posterior pituitary gland. The first hormone it has is oxytocin. First hormone is oxytocin. Oxytocin is responsible for milk ejection. Milk ejection, and it is released during childbirth. It is released during childbirth. So during childbirth, oxytocin is released, and in the process of that actual breastfeeding which takes place, or the milk is coming out, milk is being ejected, that time also oxytocin is being released. So if you want to like induce labor into somebody, right, this is a pregnant lady, and if we give her oxytocin, she will be, the labor can be induced. So that can be a medical application of oxytocin. Fine. See, you have to know this, that these hormones can have roles beyond what we are talking here, right? They have other implications also, but we are just taking the main functions, the main roles which we do. Like oxytocin is also the hormone which is basically the hormone of affection. So smallest gestures of physical intimacy like hugging or kissing are also known to release oxytocin. But its most primary application from the aspect of how we are studying it, that's going to be in childbirth and of course milk ejection. The second hormone here is vasopressin, or it is also called antidiuretic hormone, or ADH. Antidiuretic hormone or ADH. So when we discussed kidneys, we said that the kidney is filtering out what is not needed and keeping what is needed with itself. Fine. So reabsorption of water and minerals is taking place from the kidney, and this is facilitated by ADH or vasopressin. This is the name of the same hormone. Vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone, it is the name of the same hormone, right? Just an alternative name. So you can write down vasopressin or antidiuretic hormone. Its role is in reabsorption of water and minerals. Reabsorption of water and minerals from the kidney. Reabsorption of water and minerals from the kidney. Now here there is a disease you need to know about. Why I am particularly telling you about this disease is that its name is something which you know, but you didn't know that it existed beyond sugar. So there is this disease called diabetes insipidus. It has nothing to do with insulin, it has nothing to do with blood sugar. This diabetes insipidus is seen in people which have low amount of ADH in their body. Okay, the ADH or antidiuretic hormone is lesser in these people. And when this ADH is lesser, just imagine what could happen. There would be less reabsorption. And if less water is reabsorbed in your body, that means more water is being lost. You are absorbing less, you are keeping less, the kidney is keeping less in itself. So that means loss of water is more. So less ADH, right? That means you have loss of water. Then you can further go beyond this to understand this as more urination, more frequent urination, because more water has to now be removed from the body. Then that also further means more thirst. So you're thirsty all the time, right? All of them, this would be a disease called diabetes insipidus. The other diabetes is diabetes mellitus. We'll talk about it once we come to pancreas. Okay? Just remember this the name of this disease, diabetes insipidus. If you come across this, you should know that this is a different kind of diabetes caused by a deficient hormone of posterior pituitary. Okay? After pituitary gland, let's talk about thyroid gland. We're only going to talk about the main hormones. There could be more also, but I keep trimming the content according to what is relevant for you. Thyroid gland. The first thing which we've studied about thyroid gland is that it will start working once TSH is released from the interior pituitary. The hormone here is thyroid hormone, or it is also called thyroxine. Right? If you remember, it contained iodine. So when we studied iodine in minerals, we discussed this, that thyroxine contains iodine. Okay? Right now, thyroid hormone or thyroxine, its function is metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins, and fats in the body. Metabolism of carbohydrates, proteins and fats in the body. Metabolism just means their breakdown, their utilization, their processing which happens in the body. So imagine this thing now, if this hormone is not there in normal amounts, that means the whole processing or management or metabolism of your nutrients will be disturbed. The thyroid diseases are very common these days. You might have heard about a lot of people, maybe some in your family, maybe some of you also would be struggling for it. So I'll just briefly tell you about this. There are two conditions which are associated with the malfunctioning of the thyroid gland. First is called hypothyroidism. Hypo word means that it is functioning below its adequate or appropriate levels. Below the level where it should be functioning, it is functioning. Second is hyperthyroidism. Hyper means it's functioning more. Okay, it's functioning more than the optimum levels. Hypo and hyper. So when somebody says I have thyroid, it's not a complete description, because is the thyroid a hypo condition or a hyper condition? We have patients of both these types. I'll tell you the distinction. Those people who have hypothyroidism, that means thyroid gland is not working properly, thyroxine amounts are not adequate. So a person will not be able to easily metabolize its nutrients. So because metabolism will not be adequate, things would not be normally easily well processed in the body, these people with hypothyroidism experience a lot of weight gain. Because things are not being utilized, things are not being processed, so there is accumulation and gain of weight in people with hypothyroidism. On the other hand, people with hyperthyroidism who have an extra functioning thyroid gland, more amount of thyroxine is produced, these people will very quickly start metabolizing everything, right? And they will always be a little hyperactive. They will also be losing weight because everything in their body is being processed. Okay, so they would be losing weight, their heart rate would be fast normally, they would be sweating more, they would feel more hot, right? That would be the condition. Okay, so I was very happy once my parents told me that we're going to get a thyroid test done for you. So we have this idea that maybe, you're putting on all this weight because of thyroid anomaly. I was so excited, I can't tell you, that it would be so wonderful if I'm diagnosed with a thyroid disease. So what's going to happen in that case is that I would be put on medication, and without any effort from my end, I would be able to lose weight. Unfortunately, my thyroid levels were perfect. They were fine. I was not put on medication, and the struggle with the weight henceforth continues, probably till eternity, I feel. But yes, thyroid gland. The next one is parathyroid gland. The name of the hormone is also the same. Parathyroid hormone. Parathyroid gland, parathyroid hormone. Its function is, please write down, metabolism of calcium and phosphate. Metabolism of calcium and phosphate. What happens here? Just take a look. If parathyroid hormone increases, then what we see is that calcium levels also increase, but phosphorus level decreases. This is the correlation. With parathyroid hormone, calcium has a direct correlation and phosphorus has an inverse relationship. The opposite case, if parathyroid decreases, calcium also decreases, but phosphorus increases. Okay, this is the correlation. It is associated with the levels of both calcium and phosphorus in the body. A direct relationship with calcium, if this parathyroid hormone increases, calcium increases, phosphorus decreases, and the other way around when it decreases. Okay. So Manu has asked me a very interesting question where he says, he, or I'm not sure she, that is the challenge in an online mode. So you have to bear with this. That is prolactin produced only in females. No, that is not the case. See, none of these hormones, even hormones like estrogen or hormones like testosterone, they are not exclusive to any one sex. Biologically, all the hormones are present in everybody. Prolactin would be there in males also. It is just that the amount of prolactin would be variant, or the amount of testosterone. Testosterone is going to be present in females also, right? You might find that strange, but that is how it is. But the level is different, and it is actually the level of these hormones which gives you your secondary sexual characteristics. Okay, so prolactin is there in males also, but the level is not as much as the female. also in females who are actually lactating after they've delivered a baby, right, or during pregnancy. They have the highest level of prolactin as compared to those females who are maybe not in their reproductive age or who are not going through a pregnancy. Fine. Is it possible to change blood group? Sahil, no. There is no possibility of changing your blood group after you are born. There is no possibility. So whatever characters you are born with, they are genetically coded. We will study how your genes affect the blood group, right? Probably in the next class. So there's no way to change that. It is fixed. Fine? All right. It's interesting how you think. I like that. Okay. So yes, I know it's 8, but I'm not leaving until I finish this. So you have to bear with me maybe for another 10 minutes. My camera team has surrendered. Projector भी बंद कर दिया कि बस जाओ अब छुट्टी करो हमें. ऐसा नहीं होने वाला है. I don't need the projector, so I'm good without that. कोई बात नहीं. Okay, thyroid, parathyroid. The next gland is adrenal gland. Adrenal gland. The adrenal gland also has two parts, medulla and cortex. Two parts of the adrenal gland, medulla and cortex. It is the internal and the outer part which are referred to here. For medulla, there are two hormones. The first one is called adrenaline. The second one is called noradrenaline. Okay, adrenaline, noradrenaline. You must have heard about the term adrenaline rush. So these two are going to work together. They work as a team. They work in synergy, and they are emergency hormones. So just write this down about them. Adrenaline and noradrenaline are emergency hormones. They are emergency hormones which are released at the time of fear or being frightened, anger or extreme excitement. So, you know, with all your adventure sports, this term is associated because that's a combination of excitement and fear. For adrenal cortex, the first hormone is glucocorticoid. Glucocorticoids, these are for the metabolism of carbohydrates, specifically for the metabolism of carbohydrates. And the second one is mineralocorticoids. Mineralocorticoids, they regulate the amount of water. They regulate the amount of water and minerals, in the body or in the blood. You can write down specifically amount of water and minerals in the blood or in the body. Now we studied ADH. ADH was regulating only the water movement in the kidneys, how the filtration is going to work in the kidneys. This is for blood. So for maintaining your blood pressure, okay, this is going to be very important, because with alteration of amount of water or amount of minerals, you can change the pressure of the blood. So this has to be in perfect amount to make sure that your blood pressure is maintained. Okay, mineralocorticoid, it maintains your blood pressure. You can maybe write this down also. And the last organ, pancreas, right? Pancreas, the mixed gland. We're going to here talk about the endocrine function of pancreas by two hormones. First one is insulin, second is glucagon. Insulin and glucagon. Now for this you have to remember what happens to glucose in the body. So you have glucose. When this glucose is extra, it is changed into glycogen. I hope you remember this, that all extra glucose is stored in the body in the form of glycogen. So how this works is, insulin is the hormone which is going to help in this. Glucose, extra amount of glucose in blood is converted to glycogen with the help of insulin. So this is the role of insulin. You can write down, insulin reduces blood glucose level. Insulin reduces blood glucose levels. Now when glucose is needed again in the body, who is going to come and do that job? Glucagon. So glucagon will act on glycogen, help in its breakdown so that blood has more glucose. So for glucagon, please write down. Glucagon increases blood glucose levels. Glucagon increases blood glucose levels. And the disease which we very commonly know is diabetes mellitus. So what is happening in diabetes mellitus? We have a reduced amount of insulin in the blood, right? That leads to increased amount of blood. It is blood glucose only, but the common term which is being used is blood sugar. And which sugar is this, or which carbohydrate is this? It is glucose. So insulin, if its amount is reduced, the person is said to have diabetes mellitus. And in this, if you check the blood of a person, what will be seen is that increased amount of glucose is there in the blood, which causes different conditions in different parts of the body. It's a very commonly known lifestyle disorder. Okay, so these are a few chapters. Some of these are based on what we have studied today, but There are also going to be some concepts which would be used further in genetics. So you can go through this portion. We have our next class on Monday. So any section, so you don't need a detail on most of this. Like this last chapter, this is entirely on the brain. You don't need to see it at all. You can just forget about it also. This first one, chapter 6, this is on respiration and digestion. This you will understand most of it. Some of these chapters will also have inputs about plants. So use your discretion. Okay, this section is not very important, but it helps you understand a lot of different topics. Okay, so maybe you can just go through this, refer to this. If you're struggling with any particular topic, this is going to be helpful. Fine. In the next class, what we are going to do is we will start with genetics. All right? Okay, so thank you for your extra patience. Thank you, Nikhil and Vikram. Good night.